UFO disclosure in less than 6 months, persistent repeating numbers, strange metal monoliths showing up around the world. Things are getting super weird. What is going on? Right now on Higher Journeys with Alexis Brooks. Hi everyone, Alexis Brooks here from Higher Journeys. So delighted that you could join me today. Well, I think it's fair to say, here we are in 2021, and just when we thought perhaps the strangeness would be relenting, it's done anything but. It's actually ratcheted up, I think. What about you? Today we're going to be tackling some of these incidents of strangeness that are going on and persistent in our lives with my guest, Terry Lovelace. Terry's been on the show before. In fact, I believe this is his third visit with Higher Journeys. Terry is an author of Incident at Devil's Den, as well as his follow-up, Devil's Den, The Reckoning. And he is also an experiencer. Terry is going to be helping me try to connect some dots when it comes to these anomalies that seem to be swirling around us at a fever pitch, including, and he's having this too, guys, the ear buzzing. We're going to go there. I wanted to get his perspective on what he thinks is going on. The unrelenting repeating numbers that seem to be happening even more. What is this all about? Finally, we're going to be talking about the monoliths that have been showing up and disappearing inexplicably all over the world. Is there a common thread with all of these things that are going on? Is non-human intelligence at the root of it all? And finally, where is this all going? Where is this taking us? So join me for this very, very candid and very, very upbeat and exploratory discussion with my guest, Terry Lovelace, right here on Higher Journeys. Well, journeyers, welcome to Higher Journeys. So glad that you've decided to join us today. I'm here with someone who I can truly call a friend, as well as a colleague, someone that you probably know if you've been checking out our show for, gosh, I think you've been on 2 times. This is your third. Let me just start by saying welcome, Terry Lovelace, before we get into all the chronology. Welcome to Higher Journey, sir. Happy 2021 to you.
Thank you so much. It is an honor to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. And as far as 2021 goes, my theme for 2021 is, meh. Hey, how bad could it be?
Well, isn't that what we're going to get into today? Thank you for the segue. How good can it be? How bad can it be? What I'm saying now to people, Terry, is not just Happy New Year, but happy, wonky, wild, crazy, revelatory New Year to you. I think it's all going to be in there.
It is. Isn't it cool?
Yeah. Hey, listen, I watched your fantastic interview with Carrie Cassidy about a month or 2 ago, and I thought it was simply fantastic. So there's some themes that y'all talked about that I would like to pick up on, but kudos. That was a great sort of summation, not only of your Devil's Den experience, which I know many of you are probably at this point familiar with Terry's great work, Incident at Devil's Den. And now there's what I'm calling a sequel. Give us the name. We're going to talk about it on the back end, but.
Yes, just out. It's called Devil's Den, The Reckoning.
The Reckoning.
And it is parts. I answer all the unanswered questions from Devil's Den, Incident at Devil's Den. And I included 30 emails, short stories from readers who read my book and contacted me at the email address and said, reading your book kind of triggered something. And then they tell me these amazing stories. I've got over 1,400 emails. I know you do the same thing online where you have people come and share with you. So I'm sure you've seen incredible stories too.
Which is great. That's, I always say I'm no greater than my guests nor the audience who really sort of fill in the gaps. And we're all on a big dot connecting exercise. So yes, absolutely. Some of the stories that we hear. Well, again, let's go ahead. Let's dive right in, Terry. Use that as a segue because talk about unanswered questions, high strangeness seemingly at its peak right now. There's a lot you and I talked about. We sort of touched on some themes that we're going to get into in this conversation, but I wanted to start by talking about a headline that's been in the news for a bit. I think it's sort of ratcheting up a bit more, having to do with this $2.3 trillion COVID-19 stimulus relief bill. And a little thing that I think CNN said was tucked into the committee comments section, having to do with a 180-day mandate to deliver the goods on the UAP phenomenon and what's really going on in terms of their monitoring it. I want to start with that. Now, you're an attorney, not practicing anymore, I believe, but former assistant attorney general. You know the law like nobody's business.
Yes.
I want you to give us the juice, Terry.
Okay, sure.
As a layperson, I'm saying, that's interesting. Why this bill? Now, we know there's lots and lots and lots of pork, but there's still some curious elements that have emerged for me. This was my first inclination when I heard that this little section was tucked in.
When I was assistant attorney general for the U.S. Territory of American Samoa, part of my job, I worked for LBJ Tropical Medical Center for the hospital, and I wrote legislation. I wrote their legislation for advanced directives and a couple other things. So I'm familiar with the process of how a bill gets written. So when people look at it and they say, "Oh my gosh, there's 400 things in here," that doesn't necessarily mean they're trying intentionally to hide anything. What it means is that they collectively piled all this work together and passed 33 bills with one stroke of the pen. So it's not uncommon. I read this in its first draft, in its first iteration, and then I went online and was able to access the congressional, not the intelligence protected part, but the open source part, and look at the bill in its draft form, where they had strikeouts, additions, deletions. And it's interesting, if you read that from a legal standpoint, to see the progression of the bill and how it was pieced together. I'll tell you what my concern is. My concern is this. Well, first of all, let me say that, this is an evolution of what Harry Reid started with the $7 million ATIP program led by Lou Elizondo. This is another ATIP program with a different name and a different leader. And where Senator Harry Reid had the mantle, last time, now it's Marco Rubio, who's kind of leading the charge. And there's a nexus, there's a tie, there's a connection between COVID-19, the start of the date of the vaccine release, and disclosure. And it's 180 days, which is it's a very common time frame in the law. 180 days. It's a common sentencing term. I mean, it's used a lot. So 180 days doesn't surprise me. But when I read the draft bill, it was contemplated at a year at the first, and then somebody even contemplated 90 days, and they finally settled on 6 months. So, what is happening between now and the lapse of 180 days that's going to make disclosure of UFOs, the UAP, and if you've seen the CNN article or read the story, what's going to happen to make that palatable and understandable, believable to the citizens of the United States or the world, for that matter? What's going to happen? Why the need for the 180 days? That's what makes me scratch my head, and like the tie between the two is suspicious to me.
Well, we're looking at June because it's now in play, because I believe it went into effect, December, was it December 20th, something like that?
Yeah.
So we're looking June-ish.
Yes.
So let's play with this for a minute, Terry. And guys, I think it's anyone's guess, but I'm skeptical. I'm dubious. And yet very excited. Lord knows those of us in the ufology community, and whatever side you're on or whatever aspect of it you choose to probe into, we've been talking about what I call the D word forever: disclosure. and what constitutes disclosure, and is disclosure within the confines of a government disclosure, or will it be disclosure by entities themselves? But nonetheless, it seems that we're right on the precipice of some form of legitimate, well, authoritative disclosure.
May I address that issue real quick? Because I think it's important, and it's something that's a big deal to me. And that is, we all talk about disclosure. Everybody talks about disclosure. But you know what? If you look at Leslie Kean, Kean, friend of mine, nice lady, wonderful journalist, great author. Leslie published a disclosure about the Nimitz Carrier Group and the Tic Tac incident from 2005 or 2004. And I can't imagine anything more appropriate. I mean, anything that could be any greater than disclosure, other than having ET there to address the crowd. I mean, when you having been prior military, I mean, I know that you don't have a lieutenant commander, you don't have a pilot go on national television and make an address about such a topic without it being vetted and approved at the highest levels.
Absolutely.
So, this had the Pentagon and the president's stamp of approval on it. And then in 2015, and that was released on December, I think I said December 7th, 2017.
2017, correct.
And then the subsequent article about the gimbal event from 2015. Now, had an interesting encounter with an intelligence officer who was aboard the USS Roosevelt during the gimbal event in 2015. He read my book and emailed me and said, "Man, do I have a story for you?" And I said, "Yeah, well, okay," because I had people do that before. Like, what's your name? And we chit-chat back and forth. And as soon as we had a nice conversation, promised to talk again, I hung up and I got on the computer and I pulled up the yearbook for the USS Roosevelt, because you can do that online, and verified his name. And got his picture. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, can you send me a picture of yourself in uniform?" He's like, "Sure, just, don't use it until my book gets vetted." So what he did was he wrote this amazing book. And just like John Bolton, remember John Bolton wrote, I Was in the Room or something? And that had to be vetted by the White House before it could be published. And I think it was published anyway without a blessing officially. But I refer to him as Matthew. He's in my second book. His story is in my second book in his words. He was a witness to the gimbal event. And he wrote it all up and planned to. He had 16 years active duty. He was 4 years away from retirement. And he left. He was taken off ship and was working at DNI, Department of Naval Intelligence in Washington, D.C. He resigned his commission and left because of a lot of things were implied but not said. But I think it was from heat from his superiors about, the route that he was taking. So he turned his book over to the Department of Naval Intelligence for vetting, and he got it back. And guess what? All the good stuff is redacted. Black magic marker.
No surprise.
Surprise, surprise. Yeah. So, he doesn't want to violate his NDA. He doesn't want to be a whistleblower in that context. So all he could share with me was some personal experiences. And I promised him, of course, I can't share anymore. I consider it attorney-client privilege.
Absolutely. Well, I just want to bring something up in terms of what we're just sort of zooming out and looking at the chronology of where we've come from in terms of the idea of UFOs and these days UAP being brought up in a public forum or on a mainstream platform, going from at ground zero, the giggle factor to say the least. Forgive the cliche, but it seems that we've come 180 degrees from that, just about. when you read the CNN article and the boatload of others, I think Tucker Carlson did a little piece, actually interviewed Nick Pope, who's I think kind of frequenting Fox News these days on covering this subject. Mm-hmm. The giggle factor has been all but taken from it. There is more of a serious sort of, Q&A tone. Here's the question, give me an answer with no lips turning up on the end with a smirk. So something is happening in terms of setting a tone of a more serious note, which seems to me that they're trying to acclimate the public to lead them up to some revelatory statement, right?
Couldn't agree more. And I think things have changed. I think we've changed. Even without influence from the U.S. government, I think perhaps collectively, we've raised our consciousness a bit. We're open to things. I published my book in 2018, Incident at Devil's Den, and I thought I'd sell 100 copies and keep 50 in my garage in a box, and it'd be cathartic to write, and that would be it. But the public really welcomed it, and I'm very grateful for that. But I think that says something, because I think had I published that book 5 years earlier, I would have sold 100 copies and had 50 copies left in my garage. So, times have changed, and it's ramping up and it's happening faster. I think we're headed into, we're already in a new world. There is no going back to the old world. We're already in a different world. And then we're going to take one more step up the ladder. It's going to get, yeah.
So the question is, the little question, who's pushing the agenda? Is it human, non-human, or a combination thereof? Who's pushing us toward revelation in this regard, do you think?
I don't think there's any way that it could be a strictly human endeavor. I just don't believe that. Having had some contact with ET, I think that, and understand the influence that they can have over people, I think that this is a joint human, non-human endeavor on an agenda. It began with Paul Hellyer, who made the disclosure statements in 2007 in the Toronto.
In Canada, yes.
At a press conference. And, that was huge. That was major disclosure. He's like Nick Pope. He's a former defense minister for the province of Canada or the Commonwealth. Well, for Canada. Okay. Mm-hmm. He was highly placed in government circles and had access to all kinds of stuff. Paul Hellyer came out and said the United States and Canada have regular contact with ET and that they've assisted the U.S. with their space program and advanced technologies across the board. And now, December 8th, I read in the Jerusalem Post, which is a very reputable publication, that a very respected retired general by the name of Haim, H-A-I-M, Eshed, E-S-H-E-D, Haim Eshed, who spent 30 years as the general in charge of space defense for Israel, and retired and then spent another decade as a respected professor. I have friends in Tel Aviv, and I call them up and I'm like, what's up with this guy Eshed? Is he a nut job? Is he crazy? Is he legitimate? And they're like, no. He's like our Buzz Aldrin. This guy has everyone's respect. This is not some nut job. This is a legitimate academic, former military, has all the information that you can access with the need to know. And if he says it, you can take it to the bank. And he said that the United States and Israel jointly are in contact with an extraterrestrial federation. And he used the unfortunate choice of words, Galactic Federation.
Really?
I'm not a sci-fi fan, but I think that has some reference to Star Trek, maybe.
Well, no, it goes. Sure, I think that's part of it. But the Galactic Federation, there's two terms that have galactic in it, having to do with a collective of non-human species Some feel that it's more of a nefarious agenda that in this federation that's overseeing many of the activities, some otherwise. But no, the Galactic Federation is a term that's tossed around within the field of ufology a lot.
Okay. Good.
Absolutely.
I had the, well, you know what? I read an article in Forbes magazine that was pretty complimentary of Heim and his disclosure. But then, of course, they have to add a paragraph at the very end, where they kind of, take it tongue in cheek and kind of put a, I guess for sake of saving face, that they don't want to look like they're really legitimizing him. But
well, I think that's going away. That's what I'm talking about. Not completely. We still have, there were a couple tongue-in-cheek comments in the CNN article, but it's less and less. Here's my question. Let's take this a little bit deeper. Again, me still, although I consider myself a part of the ufology community, more on the experiential side. I think you know that. But I'm still a layperson. I'm not on the inside, obviously, from this perspective. We know that, particularly for those who are dubious about the motivation of intelligence in various governmental agencies regarding this whole idea of the ET UFO phenomenon, one of many ideas that have been proffered as a plan, possibly, is something called Project Bluebeam. That would be a fake alien invasion, having to do with sort of a holographic technology. I'm not well read on Bluebeam, but I know it exists. I know that it's been talked about. I'm not going to say it exists. I don't know. However, I will throw this out. This is a thought that occurred to me. If, and I say with a big I, if something like this is actually in the works, if it's something they're considering doing, having to do with basically a virtual invasion, when you look at all that's going on right now, Terry, in terms of how our lives have been turned 180 degrees, I'm going to keep using that number, on its head. We're living in virtual lives. I'm watching all of these new program formats where I think there was one concert where they introduced a holographic, one of the artists came in holographically along with two other people who were on stage. And the bottom line is this: we're being introduced and acclimated to more of a virtual reality than ever before, because we can't supposedly interact with one another till further notice. Wouldn't it be interesting if something like a Project Bluebeam were to occur right about now? Doesn't that fall within the spectrum of virtual reality?
It sure does. I mean, I don't know how many people in the world would be disappointed. I'd have to include myself, but is it possible that none of this is real? I don't know. I mean, I heard it referred to as a false flag. You may have heard that term as well.
Of course.
A false invasion would give, would trigger martial law. Mm-hmm. It would trigger
lots of things.
Lots of things. I mean, all the National Guard would be mobilized. The U.S. What would be the U.S. Military complex would have to be mobilized to meet whatever threat, however it manifests. And
well, if I can just say, see, we're on to something here. And again, guys, and I want to be clear, I am not in any way insinuating this is what's going on, because I don't think any of us know really what's going on, what's behind that iron curtain. But all of the things that you mentioned that could be invoked if something like this were to happen, well, what the heck is happening right now, more or less? I'm drawing a correlation between those themes and the themes that I'm seeing that are happening right now, including virtual reality. I found it interesting in the CNN article, particularly where it talks about, and it would make sense that they would say, wish I could find the quote, that what they're trying to mete out in the report that's to be delivered in 180 less now days has to do with the idea that these UAP could be actually U.S. adversaries.
I remember that verbiage.
They have to, I would think that they would have to do that. They have to sort of go through a process of elimination. So there's just some nuances there that piqued my interest.
It did, to me, and I've really given this a lot of thought. I mean, from a military standpoint, does it make sense to say we know the truth, but we're not going to tell you for 180 days? Why?
Why?
I don't get it.
I don't get it either. I think we'll have to find out. Well, we're taking this conversation from a sort of on the record, here's what's happening in the news. But guys and journeyers out there, you're looking at two people who've had their fair share of experiences, Terry particularly, and probably many of you out there. And I've always looked at the experiential aspect of this big story as particularly, I think, the most interesting because we have skin in this game. So as an experiencer, particularly with what you went through at Devil's Den and beyond, including some of the nefarious activity that surrounded you, including the helicopters that have gone over your house, taking all of that, how you were treated back post Devil's Den incident, how does that, Terry, look at this situation?
You know, I'm glad you asked that question because I have two opinions. I have one opinion in regard to ET, one opinion in regard to the United States government. And I'll be very candid with both. Initially, in 1977, my post-abduction experience with ET was negative. I mean, I had flash burns to my eyes. I had this burn, that was very bad all over my body. So did my friend Toby. We witnessed it together. So I was very angry about being abducted and about the things they did to me. But you know what? That I have really softened my position over the past 40 years. And yeah, I mean, I tell the story with the horror and the trauma that was in that moment. But I think that if I could sit down with there was a real clinical component when I was on this table, and the entity that I referred to as Dr. Bug in my book, the insectoid-like thing, who I always picture in a white lab coat. Now, I think that that's a projected memory. I don't think he was wearing a white lab coat. I think that was a projected image to give it a clinical feel and maybe lessen my anxiety a bit. But if I could sit down and have a beer with Dr. Bug, I think he would say, hey, man, no hard feelings, just doing my job, So I've kind of let go of some of that. Now, the military, they scared me as badly as ET did, because I was very concerned afterward that the OSI, who I think were convinced that I had a 36 exposure roll of film of this craft. God, I wish I had. And truth be known, Toby was sitting right next to me at the campfire. He had a camera in his bag a foot away from him. And the idea of taking a picture of this thing never crossed our minds. I think that states again to their influence. So
I've heard that before. I've heard that many times before, that, well, in many cases when you have a witness that's viewing whatever or going through an experience, they're in such a state of shock that it wouldn't even occur to them to pick up their camera. But I've also heard of individuals who have tried and the camera wouldn't work until the sighting was done, and then the camera would work. So this is part and parcel of the experiencer phenomenon.
Yeah.
Listen, we're going to take a very quick break, and when we come back, I want to now, as we close out this portion of our conversation, connecting the dots between this 180-day, I'm going to call it disclosure, and the monoliths that have been seen around the world. So we'll be right back, journeyers. On the other side of this break, that's what we'll be talking about. Here are just a few reasons why you'll want to subscribe to Higher Journeys on YouTube. But there are actually over 200 reasons. Help us get more people to join the journey. We appreciate your support and for joining us on the Higher Journey. I'm your host, Alexis Brooks. All right, everyone, we are back and we're going to dive into this monolith situation, see if we can connect another dot here, Terry. So again, the timing of all of this is just, it's all just so, it seems revelatory. These, whomever plans stuff, timing, days, the month are so important. Planetary cycles, who knows? The timing of the monolith numbers, we're going to talk about that too. The monoliths, from my understanding, started showing up, I believe, first in Utah, then it went to Romania, then there was a Southern California, and most recently, right here in my backyard, Quincy, Massachusetts. I'm not in Quincy, but I'm in Massachusetts. I'm going to see if I can get an image to show you all. The one in Quincy, the monolith that showed up in Quincy, all of which, by the way, have disappeared. They for anywhere from 5 to 10 days, maybe. But the one in Quincy, Massachusetts had, in a quarry, had what appeared to be a crop circle-ish geometric formation in the snow around this monolith, this silvery metal object. This started, what, mid-November?
Yeah.
Is there a dot to connect here? First of all, I have no opinion as to what this is. Again, I'm going to be open-minded and skeptical at the same time. We know that there are a lot of people doing a lot of strange things that are deployed to maybe put these things around. I don't know, but we don't know what this is yet. We're going to try to meet this out. But let's assume there's something strange going on here. Could we connect, even tangentially, these monoliths with what we've just learned about what's to be disclosed in 6 months' time?
Well, I think we have to, and I'll tell you why. The thing that appeared in Utah was discovered by two guys in a helicopter, maybe three, and they were counting elk horn sheep or something for a Department of Agriculture or Natural Resources type survey. And they saw this monolith, and they landed, and they went out and they looked at it and filmed themselves and kind of like, woohoo, this is cool. And they noted there were no footprints up to the thing. It was just sand. And they filmed the thing. And, the next news story we hear is, it's gone. It's gone. It disappeared. There's a hole, but it's full of rocks. Well, and some people said, oh, yeah, well, that was sheet metal screwed together. You could see the screws and stuff. I don't know. I mean, I think it would take a lot of trouble, a lot of effort, and a lot of money to erect this thing. And you can't tell me that once they found it, it wasn't under 24/7 observation by camera, by satellite, by whatever. But eyes were on that, I guarantee you, 24/7, and it disappeared. So there has to be somewhere there's footage of now you see it, now you don't. I really believe that. Same with the one in Romania. That one also disappeared, did it not?
I believe so. I believe all of them have.
That was my impression. Yeah, they all disappeared. But there's no footage of it on camera. There's no explanation for it. No one's ever, cut one in half and had it evaluated. So I don't know. This was a remote place in Utah. In Romania, same thing. I don't know where in Massachusetts exactly. Is it a remote area?
It's a quarry, a stone quarry. So it wouldn't be a public place per se, but not necessarily remote. Quincy is just outside of Boston.
Yeah. With CCTV coverage the way it is, I mean, if I owned a quarry, I would want 24/7 CCTV cameras around it because there's liability there. It's what's called in the law an attractive nuisance. So, drunken teenagers could go fall off a cliff and die, and you'd have a huge liability on your hands. So, my guess is that there's probably film of it somewhere. Romania, I can't speak to, but New Hampshire quarry, that's not public. I mean, that's not public land. It's got to be probably private land owned by somebody.
Massachusetts quarry. Yeah, we can look into that and see. I don't know. And like I said, I think I told you off air, I had reached out to the gentleman that posted. He took a photo at the when it was there, and you can see the geometric, concentric circles around the monolith itself, and this really odd, not odd necessarily, graffiti, a wall of rock with graffiti and words like omen and other things. I'm going to see if I can get a picture, and I think I might be able to, because here's a legal question. If somebody posts a photo on a social media channel like Instagram or Facebook, aren't I allowed to put the photo because it's public, because it's been publicly posted?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Check into that, because we got to get a picture up there. I direct messaged him to see if he'd allow me to do it, but I think I can do it anyway, so y'all can see it. You can even look it up and find it, but interesting nonetheless. Okay, so connecting a dot. Let's assume there's something strange going on. I mean, no matter the origin, it's strange, right?
It's strange.
I still think what's happening with, we're calling it 180 days, has a fair amount of strangeness, or at least an X factor. How do we connect the dots if you were to make a case?
You know what I would do? First of all, I would want to look at the dates of all the events, 3 or 4 of them now, 4 maybe. I'd want to look at the dates of all the events and see if there's any connection numerically, mathematically to the dates. Dates of arrival, dates of disappearance. And I think got to be a message, got to be, there are subtle ways of, I think, of ET saying, yeah, we're here. That they appear in benign ways that don't freak people out, don't cause them a lot of anxiety. Choosing the monolith, I mean, after the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, is kind of a no-brainer. What they're trying to say, we're the primates, and they're the erectors of the monolith. So, they're here, we're here, and I got that feeling when I had my interaction with them. The analogy that I used all the time is that, I got a dog, or had a dog, who loved me, loved my family when our kids were little. And he would come over and put his head in my lap and look up at me with his big eyes. And I'd pet him. And he knew that I was the alpha. And I gave him love and support. And we each knew our respective roles, And when I encountered the beings I encountered, I felt like the dog in the equation. I felt like these things were 500 rungs up the evolutionary ladder, and it was a humbling experience. So I think we're dealing with something that's very, very intelligent, and probably is, appearing to us in benign ways that get our attention. I could think of examples. From a numerological standpoint, I can think of some examples.
We're going to talk about that, as you all know. You got my script in front of you?
No.
We're going to go right into that. Listen, let's go there. Let's talk about from a numerological standpoint, because y'all know we've been talking about these repeating numbers. When are we not going to talk about it? But when are we going to have some, I keep using the word revelation. That's the word that is prominent. Revelation about why so many people are seeing repeating numbers. Let's go there.
I'm ready. For those who may not know me, I don't have, the star credibility that people like Robert Hastings has, who spent 30 years investigating UFOs, spoken in front of Congress several times. He wrote a book in 2018 called Confessions, and where he admits that he is an experiencer, an abductee, which has not been public knowledge before. But to the story, to get back on the topic, Robert Hastings and I have been talking often for a couple of years, and he told me about he's been experiencing the triple digit effect, both he and Frank Warren, for some years.
About how many? About how many? Curious. Do you know?
Three years maybe. So I started, I'll tell you how bad it got. It got so bad at my house. My poor wife was so freaked out. She said, "Can we take the digital clock out of the bedroom, please, and replace it with an analog clock?" And we did. And I don't wear a digital watch. If I look at my phone, a lot of times I'll pick it up and I'll see the triple digit effect. And it's beyond the pale coincidence that the triple digit thing manifests. And I think that it's a non-human influence, and it's a benign way to get our attention, but it certainly has my attention.
Mine too, and many of those who are watching right now. So I think I told you off air, my latest is 55. Anybody out there seeing specifically, because see, numerologically, Terry, each number denotes, it's a language. Each number has its own symbology associated with it. Interestingly, the only thing that I could think of numerologically is that we are in a 5-year right now. I just did a show with numerologist Sharon Milstein about what the 5 denotes. But in my case, I'm seeing 2 5s. What are your thoughts there? 55, and I want to use this. We can go from this to that in a few. Your abduction at 5:55 a.m. But first thoughts on the 55.
Well, on the 55, you make the obviously it's either 2 5s or a 10. A 1 and 0 is significant in its binary meaning. And
wow,
the 5 is amazing that you bring up, because I won't use her name, but she's associated with Yvonne Smith's group, and she's a very psychic lady, and a dear friend. And in our internet or email dialogue, she told me that she sees the current instability, I'll call it, lasting until 2026. Now, independent of her, someone else told me the date 2026. Now Lucy, I just said her name, but my friend.
We can scratch that.
Okay, thank you. My friend told me, because I had a numerical weird experience that I've never had before. And it was July 22nd. And I'm watching TV, and the date July 22nd came up a couple times. And I thought, that's weird. I like coincidence. I noticed them. That's weird. But I wrote it off as coincidence. Then I'm reading a book. I forget whose book I'm reading, because I'm reading 12 at the same time. But it was talking about an event that happened. May have been Leslie Kean's book, Surviving Death. And the date July 22nd came up again. Then I read a news article, and July 22nd, 2018 came up again. The years were all different, but the July 22nd was the same. So I told my friend, hey, I've got this going on. 6 times, I counted 6 times, July 22nd came up. And that's weird. That's just beyond
pale. Absolutely. Yeah.
And she said, well, let me give that some thought. I'll get back to you. And she was with me, and Whitley and James Lowe and Yvonne Smith at Pine Ridge. That's the subject of Whitley's book.
New World, yes. Oh, yeah.
So we were at Pine Ridge together and had some unbelievable experiences. Pine Ridge, to me, was a life-changing event. It really was, in a lot of ways that I don't have time to even touch upon. But Lucy emailed me back and said July 22nd is the date that we were in Pine Ridge, and the date of the we witnessed the ceremony. And then, coincidentally, 1 year later to the day, July 22nd, 2019, she went back to Pine Ridge for what was called a healing ceremony. So July 22nd, while it didn't mean anything to me, had a lot of meaning for Lucy.
You've now said her name 3 times, so I'm going to say.
I think you can roll with it. There are 10,000 Lucys in this world.
Exactly. I think we'll be fine. Sorry, Lucy, Jeanette, Lisa, whatever. Yeah. Well, here's a thought that in looking at this vast mystery, as I'm looking at the clock and it's 2:11, right? This always happens, of numbers, and for whatever reason, more and more individuals on terra firma have been introduced to numbers and have been forced to pay attention to these patterns, assuming they are somehow connected to some non-human intelligence, some non-human force. And it is benign, let's assume. Could it be a point of acclimating us to start to communicate vis-a-vis numbers?
Boy, I never thought of that, honest to God. But I mean, 1 and 0, numbers are the universal languch.
Absolutely. They sure are.
Entity, no matter where you're from, is going to understand pi. I mean, it's the same. I mean, it's kind of Newtonian-based physics, but you could sure take the math to a quantum level if you wanted. If they chose to, they could take it there. Who knows? 5-5. There may be some quantum it may be relative to something on the quantum.
Well,
level.
like you said, numerologically, 5 and 5 equals 10, and you always reduce it to its single digit, which is 1. But 0 and 1 is the core, is binary code. Yeah. I brought the idea of the 11 and 11 phenomenon up within the context of binary code when I gave my initial talk in Australia a couple of years ago at this point, that this could be the language of seeing the 11s, even though they're minus the zeros, but looking at a graph, not a graph, but a picture of binary code, and you see the groupings of 2 1s or 3 1s or 4 1s, repeating ones. Could there be a connection with our seeing the 11s and binary code, which would insinuate the possibility of a simulated universe that we are operating within? Big question. I didn't expect you to answer, but it's just a very curious phenomenon. I'm sorry.
I've got something to add to that. I'm glad you asked that question. I mean, anybody that has doubts about the numerological thing and think, oh, that's just coincidence. That's just coincidence. I got a great story. I like history. I read a lot of history. And, World War I was a tremendous disaster. And it's memorialized every year on November 11th, the date that the armistice and the treaty was signed. Well, the armistice anyway, the ceasefire was signed. But it marked the end of the war, 11/11/18. Well, World War I began with the assassination of, was it Ferdinand and Isabella? I don't remember the names, but were they Serbian? I mean, I'm getting out of my comfort zone here, but we know that World War I began when this royal couple was in a car and they were assassinated and shot dead. And that created the beginning of World War II. And everybody picked sides because there were all these allegiances. And before you know it, the whole world's involved, no war. And I mention this to get to one point, and that is that car is still in a museum. And if you go online and look at it, the license plate on the front of the car, I didn't see the back of the car, but the license plates on the front of the car from the original date of the assassination is 11/11/18. Maybe we are in a simulation, you know? It's just, what are the odds? I mean,
what are the odds? I think that one day we may just have a grand epiphany as to numbers being that we're going to need to use more readily to communicate. I don't know why what's coming to mind is the Tower of Babel, which Sharon Milstein, who's a numerologist I had on just a couple of weeks ago, brought that up as she brought up the Tower of Babel, the biblical story, obviously, within the context of how language was, or the, let's see, how can I summarize? In the Tower of Babel, when people wanted to rise up against the force we call God, what God did, as the story goes, is create, I don't know how many different languages to stop people from communicating, to go against him, right? Does that sound familiar to you?
I'm kind of Old Testament, what I call the Bible. I'm kind of oriented in that direction. So,
and yeah. I don't even know it as well as I should, but
use their tongues. Yes.
The bottom line is that languages were created as a means to, it said, to separate people from coming together. Numbers being a universal language would then reunify people, if that makes any sense. That could eventually replace, a bunch of different languages. How many languages do we have on the planet? Who knows? And dialects. Numbers, if they're a universal language and something is trying to get us back to not just speaking or understanding or communicating with the language of numbers, but telepathically. Perhaps we won't even need to use our voices to communicate anymore. Is some force trying to acclimate us to get back to where maybe we came from to begin with?
Boy, it's no secret that I had the entity that I refer to as Betty in my book. I remember her as a young child as Sue. They're one and the same entities. And she appeared to me in my study in late October, third week in October 2017, and told me that things in my leg would be removed, and 3 weeks later I had the x-ray to prove that they were, but I don't want to digress here. But what she told me was that humanity needs to stop acting regionally and needs to start acting globally. And we were communicating telepathically. And I'm sure she caught my confusion at that, regional versus globally. And she said that, for mankind to rise on a conscious level and to get to the next step in evolution, we need to think she said, we're one planet, we're one people. And we need to do away with borders. There's no need for borders. We need to do away with walls. We just need to be people, inhabitants, citizens of the planet Earth. And yeah, I think she's right.
I think she's right too.
Something we can hope for.
And yet we're seeing the divisiveness, the division, and the polarity, and the separation at its peak. So perhaps we're at the precipice that we have to go through before we can get back to ground zero, being one world, one universe, one. So,
I don't want to. I'm hesitant to go here. Go ahead with your thought.
No, I'd like you to continue, because I have a feeling if you're hesitant to go there, it's got to be pretty deep. Go there, Terry.
I'm afraid that we're in for a period of bloodshed. And I don't talk politics. I respect everyone's point of view. There's a phrase I like, and it is reasonable minds can disagree. And our Rodney from from the riots in L.A. Rodney King said something I love, and it was, "Can't we all just get along?"
Yeah, that's right.
And but there seems to be, I think the right word is radicalization, polarization, where everyone seems to be at the opposite ends, and nobody wants to meet in the middle. Nobody wants to shake hands and say, can't we get along? And I'm afraid that, and I'm not picking sides, but I'm afraid that if we stay on this current course, there'll be bitterness, more divisiveness, and unnecessary bloodshed.
I agree. Well, I mean, I think the writing's on the wall there. That's, Terry, I really feel that has been seeded, and that mankind really for millennia have been indoctrinated into, we know the playbook, right? Do I even have to say it? Divide and conquer. And yet there seems to be a force that is trying to prevent that from happening. And that's where the conversation, we're not going to go there today, but the idea of our being perhaps a spiritual war, or there being a spiritual war going on, of which we are what's being warred about. I don't know. But it seems, particularly when you look at what's happening planetarily and the conjunctions, now I can say plural, that we've gone through, that the wisdom keepers have been talking about for years, and this shifting into the Aquarian age et al. Is there a faction that is aware that we are being primed for a true form of evolution and ascension and are trying to stop it? I don't know. But it seems like the ramp up and the sustained vision and the intensity of it, you have to ask yourself the question, are we being propped up for this, primed for this, so that we are not focused on what cosmologically is trying to happen naturally to bring the power out in us? I don't know.
It's just, it's almost like we're going to have to go through some kind of trial by fire. I mean, we're going to have to be forged in that, like so many other generations have. We're going to have to be, there's going to have to be bloodshed. It seems like, God, I hope not. I'm not hoping for that. I don't want that. But I'm saying that intuitively, I feel that.
Yeah.
And, I think we all need to be, and I'm not a prepper or anything like that. But I think people do have a responsibility to be prepared, and maybe be able to put up with a 2-week outage of electricity or whatever kind of emergency might come up. Mm. I think is just wise to do.
It could be in any case. Absolutely. Well, again, I guess in my private moments, Terry, I've said, whatever is happening here, let it be, so we can get on the other side of it. Let's get on with it, whatever it's going to be, so we can get on the other side of it, because I just know that what's on the other side is far more glorious than we can ever imagine. I feel that. You talk about intuitively. I do. Let's get on the other side of this. People are going through mental, psychological, emotional, physiological challenges like they've never had before. And I'm going to use this as a segue as we close out or begin to wind down, to talk about the physiological changes, one of which you have recently started having, and that's ear buzzing. Yeah, we're going to go there, journeyers, because Terry just told me on email, guess what? I'm going to use that as a segue. Give us a short sheet on what's going on. Now, I know I'm going to just say very, very briefly, because we don't have that much time left. You have had tinnitus. Many millions of people do. This is not tinnitus. This is something new that's emerged. Describe what's happening with you as part of this package of getting through all of this. physiological stuff.
This has been going on intermittently, but now it's constant. The genesis of it, I couldn't give you a date. I'd say at least a year. But since November of 2020, it's been a constant and an annoyance. Now, I do have tinnitus, but tinnitus gives me a baseline. I know where my tinnitus is. I know what it sounds like. And this is different. This is in addition to, it's a tone. It actually, to me, it sounds like a couple of tones blended together. And it's higher in pitch than the buzzing that I hear in my head. And I had, true story, a really bad day with it, where it was really annoying. And I get an email from, and I should talk to him, see if I can send you a copy of his email. I get an email from, he's a former Los Angeles County city attorney who's retired. He's my age, who's well respected, but he's an experiencer, he doesn't share that with many people. But I'm having this bad day. He sends me an email and says, "Man, is this buzzing in my head ever going to stop?" And that started our conversation. And then we, both fessed up that, yeah, this is driving us crazy. So how many other people?
Wow. Do you hear that noise? That was a buzz for sure. I don't know if y'all heard that. I think there may have been a tractor trailer going by on the highway back here. Anyway, we've gone from 180 days till disclosure. I'm calling it that. We've talked about the monoliths. We've talked about numbers, repeating numbers. We're talking about this physiological anomaly that people, both who have conversations like ours and many who don't, that are coming to me saying, "What is this? There's something going on here." This is a big dot connecting exercise, and I believe we'd be involved in this labyrinth if we didn't have the potential to solve it. And so here we are, keeping this conversation going. So I just want to say, journeyers, look, we are all in this together. I'm hesitating when I say that because we've heard it way too many times. I say we're all in something together. We don't know. We're probably going to come out in slightly different places depending on where we are and how we look at it. But man, we're on this spaceship Earth together, and what a ride it is. What a ride it is. So closing thoughts, Terry, and then a couple of announcements. And what we're going to do next. We're going over to Patreon, to the after show, to continue the conversation, go a little bit deeper, maybe a lot deeper. But closing thoughts on our conversation today.
Yeah, just briefly. We've touched on a lot of things here that are, I believe they're clues. They're clues, they're pieces of the puzzle that are given to us very intentionally. And I think we need to pay attention.
Pay attention. Pay attention. Yes. And there are a lot of, I would dare say, reasons for us not to pay attention because of distraction. That could be part of this play as well. So it is absolutely imperative that that our awareness, our acuity becomes so much stronger. We have the time to do it. I'm not saying go sniff out something that's not there, but be aware. Be aware, people. We'll figure this out. Hey, listen, I also want to say in closing, before we head on over to Patreon, I'm so excited because I could talk to this guy forever, and I know you could listen to him forever as well. He's great. Terry was kind enough to donate a chapter of his brand new book. Let's talk about that for a minute. Your brand new book, December? Was it December that it was published?
Yeah, around Christmas time. Yes.
Devil's Den, The Reckoning. I'm going to put an image of the book cover up. Goes even deeper than Incident at Devil's Den. I would say if you don't have Incident, you want to get that and get the second, of course, as its companion. But Terry has been kind enough to donate a chapter of his latest book to our blog. So if you go to blog.higherjourneys.com, you can read that chapter there. And we haven't put it up yet. By the time you see it, it will, of course, be up. But I'm really excited. I'm excited to read the whole book. But I think it'll be a good teaser. Tell us a little bit about how is this different from Incident at Devil's Den?
When I published Incident at Devil's Den, in the back, in the epilogue of the book, I put an email address. And I said, look, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, but if you email me and want to share an experience, I'll listen, and I'll talk to you, and I'll return the email. So I expected to get a couple dozen emails. Well, to date, I've got over 1,400 emails. And people write to me, and there's a core out of that 1,400. I value each and every one of them, but there's a core group of about 400 of them that are just absolutely incredible. And there's a thread of commonality that runs through them. They all start with this disclaimer, and they say, please don't think I'm crazy, or I know this is going to sound nuts. So after that, they give me that disclaimer, and then they tell me these most amazing stories that are just absolutely incredible. So I have a core group I isolated of 30 stories that I made contact with the people, and I, to the best of my ability, vetted them and vetted their story. We started with 50, I eliminated 20, and we ended up with 30. But they are incredible stories, and they run the entire gamut of the UFO, extraterrestrial, interdimensional, USOs, UFOs. I mean, it's all there. Screen memories, unbelievable stuff that people shared with me. And then in the first part of the book, people ask me, the most common question I get is, whatever happened to your friend Toby? And that's a good question because it's a long story. And I explain that in detail in the book. And his untimely demise, which came much later than, well, yeah, it's a long story. And there was a chapter that I wrote for inclusion in Incident at Devil's Den that my editor said, you know what? You talk enough about your childhood stuff. Why don't you save this? Why don't we cut this? And I'm like, oh, okay. But I was really disappointed in that because I think it's a very important chapter. There's also a chapter in there about my cousin Gerald, who used to come and visit once a year in the summer from rural Arkansas, the family. That's how poor people had vacations back in the day, is you'd go to a relative's house and drink and play cards and, live with them and have a couple of days and hang out and then go back home. So they would come every year. And my cousin Gerald, while I'm having monkeys, I'm seeing monkeys in my room. Gerald is seeing clowns. I'm seeing circus monkeys. He's seeing clowns. I guess.
I remember.
I guess the circus theme kind of goes with the Lovelace family, but I swear, I got emails from people who said, "Oh yeah, I saw clowns. I saw eagles. I saw owls. Lots of owls.
Absolutely, yes.
Deer." I got a story in my book about a kid from El Paso who saw a raccoon walking on two legs in his room that would speak to him telepathically. Orbs, little gray men. I mean, just
the gamut.
The gamut.
Clowns are probably the most, well, I can't say for sure, but it's certainly a common, what we refer to as screen memory in the abduction phenomenon, or let's just say loosely the contact phenomenon. Owls, of course, and lots of different kinds of birds. But I have to tell you, I'll say this, and then we're gonna shut it down. But and you're talking so much about Betty and how you've described her to me over the last several years. It occurred to me, I wonder if Betty is a screen memory and how you see her. This crazy wig used to be, and I remember specifically you said that you called her Betty because she reminded you of Betty Rebel,
right,
which is a cartoon character, clown, cartoon character, monkey. These are all sort of caricatures that these entities seem to feel is very important to the witness, to the experiencer. I don't know. We'll call that one a cliffhanger, but it's occurred to me that Betty is not how you see her is not who she really is. He or she. So, just a thought. Good
one. It's a good one.
Listen.
Appear in a manner most benign.
Yeah, exactly. That's a key word there. So listen, we can continue this conversation if you want. We can take wherever you want to go because we're going over to Patreon right now. Join us, will you? In the meantime, I'm going to say, Terry, tell us where you can go. Terry, tell us where we can go to learn more about your work. I kind of screwed
Yes,
that
I
one.
have a website, terrylovelace.com, and I have some images there. I have x-rays with pictures of the things that were in my leg. Well, ones below my knee are still there. Also a hand drawing that I made in detail of the ship that we saw in 1977. And the drawing is contemporaneous with the event. I recorded all the events in a notebook at the time. I had the forethought to do that. And then my books are available on Amazon. Incident at Devil's Den is available in a Kindle version, in a paperback book with photographs and x-rays, drawings in the back. They're very interesting. And it's available Kindle, paperback, and I did a audiobook in my own voice, which, for what it's worth, some see it good, some see it bad, but it's in my own voice because I wanted to tell the story. And then The Reckoning has half of it devoted to the rest of the story, and then the 30 folks that shared their very candid stories with me. So both are available on Amazon. And
great. Well, we'll make sure to have links not only in the show, but of course, like I said, go on over to blog.higherjourneys.com, get yourself the sample chapter from Terry's latest book, and we will always also have links there as well. All right, Terry Lovelace, always a pleasure. Love you much. Big hugs, big virtual hugs to you and to you, journeyers. And we shall see you, if not on Patreon, we'll see you soon for next episode of Higher Journeys. Have a great day, everyone. Take care.